the Scottish Government can provide to ensure Christians are protected here in Scotland, and what action it is taking to prevent hatred towards religious groups through better education.
Cabinet Secretary.
Absolutely welcome any efforts to ensure that we continue to provide support to people around the world, but also to build on our vision, which is a modern, inclusive world which respects and realises internationally recognised human rights and protects people who want to practice their faith.
In response to a question which included the fact that Scotland was historically Christian. So we're moving away from that to a modern and inclusive Scotland. Now, modern, away from historical, obviously, and inclusive of what? Who do we need to be tolerant of? Why do we need to enforce inclusive measures? Who could that possibly be for? Oh, that's right, the Muslims. The Muslims that are protected under a hate crime law. The Muslims that you spent the best part of the month that followed after Christchurch pandering to. At every given notice, standing side by side the Muslim community, the crackdown on the far right that really don't exist for the most part.
And we continue to do that through working with Interfaith Scotland, other faith groups, and certainly after following the Sri Lanka attacks, I wrote to many members of the Christian faith in Scotland to make sure that we stood in solidarity with them, to support them, and to make sure that they understood that we stood in solidarity with them here in Scotland, but also...
You wrote to them, that is so kind of you. But you compare that, as I said, what we heard and what we've seen in the wake of Christchurch, in comparison to the Sri Lanka terrorist attack, and there's a clear difference on display here, as well as there was with many other politicians and people in general for that matter across the West. And it kind of goes to show in the SNP or the Scottish Government's case, a classic case of putting their eggs in the one basket a bit too soon, if you ask me. As it says here, Muslims across Scotland and elsewhere will today visit their mosque for Friday prayers, and myself and Cabinet for Justice Humza Yousaf will visit the mosque to stand in solidarity with our Muslim communities and offer our heartfelt support. We must stand against Islamophobia and all forms of hate, as Scotland's diversity is our strength apparently, and we value and appreciate our relationships with our diverse faith communities and welcome their contribution to our society. And after the Sri Lankan massacre, tweeted this: Sri Lanka remains in the thoughts of the world today after the horror suffered on Easter Sunday. A loss of life on such a scale is beyond awful, and attacks on places of worship must be condemned by all. The following
morning and saw the news. I'm not ashamed to say that. I wept. I was really saddened, heartbroken actually by the news that was coming through. And I've not been able to shake off the feeling. I come to this mosque regularly, I go to Friday prayers regularly, but today felt different. I was there with 3,000 worshippers today, and it's all that everybody was talking about, and it was just the shock. You could feel it, the tension, as soon as you went inside the mosque, and people are scared. It's not just about the violent physical attacks. Let's not pretend that this happened in a vacuum. It did not. The anti-Muslim rhetoric that we've seen in the UK, let alone anywhere else, gives us real cause for concern.
Right then. Sturgeon said,
"Thick and cowardly, and first and foremost my thoughts are with the victims and their families, with New Zealand's Muslim community, and indeed with all of the people of New Zealand. New Zealand is very far away from Scotland on the other side of the world, but I know for Muslims here this attack feels very personal and very close to home, and that's why I wanted to come here to Glasgow Central Mosque today to offer my solidarity and reassurance to our Muslim community here. Today is a very stark reminder of the duty all of us have to stand firmly against the hatred and the far-right ideology that motivates attacks like this. And there is no place in any of our societies for Islamophobia, for anti-Semitism, for racism of any kind, and it is important that we stand shoulder to shoulder to send that message."
That's great. No mention of anti-Christian hatred or racism, no mention of anti-white racism or hatred, and let's not beat around the bush, it does happen. I know, in the intersectional worldview, the lens that these people view society in, that's impossible. But the reality of the matter is, it is possible, and in the wake of Christians being persecuted at near genocidal levels in certain parts of the world, I was interested to see what sort of reaction, if any, we would see from the Scottish Government. Do you think that same vitriol was displayed when referring to Sri Lanka? No. We had the First Minister relentlessly coming out day after day to remind us all that we need to stamp out the far right's dog whistling and the xenophobia and the white supremacy and all that jargon. All of a sudden, provable in justifying the Islamophobia hate crime law, which was implemented not too long after the fact. And of course, last but not least, it went a long way in proving to the people that happened to be embroiled within the far left wing of our society that there really was a problem with the so-called far right. Helmut Head had said at the time has made clear her determination to tackle far right extremism in the wake of the terror attacks. She said regrettably that Ms Ardern was absolutely right when she said nations around the world are now engaged in a global fight against the far right, racist and extremist ideology. Speaking at the start of First Minister's questions, etc, 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 I do want to begin today with heartfelt condolences. The shootings in Christchurch have been felt deeply here in Scotland as in other countries, and perhaps especially in our Muslim community. Now, fast forward to the days currently in the wake of the fact that Christians are persecuted worldwide. Or what about the events that followed after the Sri Lanka terrorist attack? Do you think the same vitriol was presented for the world to see? Do you think the same level of compassion and condolences were expressed for Christians? Were we told as a historically Christian country to stand side by side with our Christian brothers worldwide? Oh no, were we fuck? Oh no, we weren't. Of course we weren't. And this is the double standards that these left-wing progressive twats can't seem to fathom. That they are the problem, and the desperate need to stand in solidarity with Muslims, and it all led in the end to Islamophobia finally being recognised as a hate crime, and Muslims became a protected class in intersectional Scotland. You fast forward to Sri Lanka, and not only was the most basic of responses from the First Minister, the BAME community that was very vocal in the wake of Christchurch seemed to be rather silent in the wake of this one, and the same could be said for a lot of the same people that had a hell of a lot to say when the original attack occurred, which featured a white man as the perpetrator. But when the roles were reversed, the clear bias came and shone a light. Their politics and their mantra, their actions, and their protected classes. It's a perfect storm, is it not? Peace.